Okay, hello everyone. Alright, so the next program in chapter 5 is odd even counter. Okay, so in this chapter you saw an example of how you write an algorithm that determines whether a number is even or odd. Write a program that generates 100 random numbers and keeps a count of how many of those random numbers are even and how many of them are odd. Alright, so we know chapter 5 is all about functions, so we're going to create functions, to basically handle some of these operations, or basically some of these things. So we have to write a program that's going to generate 100 random numbers, right? We have to write code to figure out, as the program is generating 100 numbers, which one is odd, which one is even. And we should have a mechanism for keeping track of which ones are odd, and obviously how many of them are odd and how many of them are even, right? So let's start. So we know chapter 5 is all about functions, so we're going to define some of these, break some of these in functions. Basically, break everything in functions, okay? So let's see. Write a program that generates 100 random numbers. Okay, 100. So let's just focus on that one. Since we are going to be generating random numbers, we need the random module. Okay, and random module is just a single. So it's just a single Python file with functions about or functions that help us create random numbers, and you basically it functions that help us create random numbers. So we need to import the random module so we can use those functions to generate random numbers, right? So in other words, so how to do that? To do that, we have to go ahead and import that. So import random. That's it. Basically random. I was just thinking about calling the function. That's why. All right, never mind. We have to go ahead and import random so we can go ahead and use those functions in a random module to generate random numbers, right? Okay, so we've done that. Now let's go ahead and define a function that is going to generate a random number. Okay, let's go ahead and define one function that's going to generate a random number. Now, I know the question says we should generate 100 random numbers, right? But let's go ahead and create one function, a function that generates just one random number. And then when we are writing our program, we will use a loop, okay, to call it 100 times. So it's pretty much the same. Let's do that. Define a function that's going to generate a random number. So let's define a function. Let's call it generate random number. And this function is not going to accept any arguments, so I'm not going to go ahead and define any arguments here. Sorry, define any parameters here. Sorry, it's not going to accept any arguments, so I'm not going to define any parameters here. Okay. So once we've created a function, now we have to write the code in there, right? Okay, so we have the random module. So in order to create a random number, right, we're going to use a function in the random module called randint, meaning random integer. So I'm going to first type in the name of the module random dot and the name of the function random dot randint. Now the randint takes in a couple of arguments. It takes in your starting, where it's basically your range. It takes in the range, the starting point of your range to the ending point of your range. So the program didn't really specify the range, basically what range should we create random numbers from, right? So let's go ahead and generate random numbers from 1 to 10, or in the range of 1 to 10 included. So basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 all the way to 10. And the random int takes in those arguments. It takes in your starting point, okay, and then it takes in your ending number. So basically this is generating a random number in the range of 1 to 10. Okay, now 1 is included and 10 is included, right? So we can have 1 as a random number, basically from this method for function call, and we can have 10 as a number also. Now when we call this is going to generate a random number from 1 to 10 and return it. So when it returns it, we need a place to store it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and create a variable in this function that's going to hold that number. So I'm going to call it random number. This is a variable, random number, and then I'm going to set it equal to whatever this is going to return. This is going to return a random number from 1 to 10. Now again, 10 is included. Okay, 10 is included. Okay, so once we have the number, let's go ahead and return it. So return random number. All right, so we're done with that. We're done with this function. It just once you call this function, it just returns a random number in the range of 1 to 10. Okay, now the question goes on to say that So basically, write a program that generates 100 random numbers and keeps a count of how many of those random numbers are even and how many of them are odd. Okay, so once we've generated a random number, we need to figure out if it's even or odd, right? So let's go ahead and define another function that's going to figure out if the number is even or odd. Well, first of all, let's define a function that's going to check to see if that number is even, only even. Because think about it. If it's not even, then it's odd, right? If it's not even, then it's odd. So let's go ahead and define one function. Let's call it is even. And if it's even, then it's going to return true. If it's odd, then it's going to return false, right? So let's call this function is even. Is this number even? Okay, basically. So it's going to take in one argument, and that argument is going to be a number, or basically a random number, or it could be any number, right? So we can say, let's go ahead and call it, this function is going to take in a number, random number, I guess random number, or any number. So let's call it a number. So this function is going to take in number as an argument, and it's going to return true if this number argument is an even number, and false if it's odd. So now let's figure out how to do that in the code, like in the function itself. So let's create an if statement to check. So if, now there's a way to check if, let me just pull up my calculator here. There's a way to check if a number is even or odd. There's a way to figure it out. Now if you have, let's say, if you want to find out if a number is even or odd, if you have the number itself, let's say 5. No, actually, let's start with 4. If you have 4 and you want to check if 4 is even or odd, right? In this case, let's first check to see if it's even. If it's even, okay. So basically, to find out if it's even, if you divide that number 4 by 2, by the number 2, and you get a remainder of 2. Now, 4 divided by 2 gives you 2, exactly 2, no remainder at the end. So if you take that number and you divide by 2, and you get a remainder of 0, that means that number is even. If you take 8 and you divide by 2, you get 4, remainder 0. Because we got a remainder of 0, that number is even. If you take 5, which is an odd number, and you divide by 2, you get 2.5. You get 2 remainder 0.5. Because it has a remainder, it's not an even number. So that's one way we can use to figure out if a number is even or odd. So it's even, we've been given a number. Let's check to see if it's even. Now, the way to basically get a remainder from a division is using the modulo sign. So let me show you an example. So if, right, so if, well, I don't actually have to have parentheses, but, well, yeah, actually we need parentheses. All right, you don't have to, but then you can put it there just to make sure everything is, nice and organized. And you follow the order of, I guess if you have operations there also, it helps in, following order of operations. So let's have an if statement, and let's say if this number divided by 2. If this number divided by 2. Okay, actually the parentheses is going to be just around this because we want that to be evaluated first, right? If this number divided by 2, you can have parentheses around everything. Like for example, you can have parentheses around your if condition, and then in here you can have parentheses around this number divided by 2, and then you can do something. You can add something here. So this is going to be for your if statement, the whole if statement, and this is going to be for just this number divided by 2. But we don't actually need it. So let's start this way. If we just wrote number divided by 2, so if the number divided by 2, right, that's what we want to figure out. So let's surround it with parentheses. So we want to evaluate this first. We want to get the result of this first. So the number divided by 2, right, gives you so basically if you have a division sign, it's going to basically, this is going to give you the real answer, the exact answer. So 8 divided by 4 gives you the real answer of, let's say, of 2. That's not what we want. We want the remainder of it. So we have to change this division sign to the modular sign, because this is still going to divide number by 2, but it doesn't return the answer, it returns the remainder. So if we have 4 modulus, so when we're having our division, 4 divided by 2, we're getting 2 as an answer, right? But then this is still going to do 4 divided by 2, but it's not going to give us 2 as an answer. 2 is an answer, all right, but it has a remainder of 0. The modulus is going to return the remainder. So if number divided by 2 gives us a remainder of 0, I'm using double equal sign to say if it gives us a remainder of 0. So if the division of these two numbers gives us a remainder of 0, the modulus returns the remainder. Okay, so if it gives us a remainder of 0, then that number is even. Then in that case, what we want to do is to return true. Return true. Let's I'm not sure. Let's use a small letter. If it gives us an error, we'll use a capital letter. I think in Java you can use a small letter. I'm not really sure. It's been a while since I'm not really sure on those, but I think it's supposed to be capital. But let's keep it small. If it gives us an error, we'll come back to it. All right. So if the number divided by 2, okay, this is modulus. All right. So let's say number modulus 2 gives us a remainder of 0. Again, modulus returns a remainder. Number modulus 2 returns a remainder of the division of number and 2. So okay. So I hope it's clear. If you divide number and 2 and you get a remainder of 0, then return true. Okay. This modular sign returns the remainder after these two numbers have been divided. It doesn't return the answer itself. All right, and no semicolon here. I don't know why I'm mixing everything up today. All right, so no semicolon. All right, so okay, so think about it. If the number divided by 2 gives us a remainder of 0, then that means that number is even, right? So in that case, return true. Now, what's going to happen if that number is not even? If it doesn't give us a remainder of 0, then that means it's not even, right? So this block here is only going to run if that number is even. Okay, so we can just go down here and say return false. You know, I'm having a feeling this is a capital letter, so I'm just going to switch to a capital letter. Right? I just wanted us to see if it gives us an error first, but then I think it's a capital letter. I can tell from the color coding. Okay, so once this function is called, this is only going to run if the number is an even number. If the number is not an even number, this whole thing is not going to run. It's just going to go straight to the statement and return false. Again, no semicolon. I keep on typing semicolon. I do that in Java. So, all right. So if that number is an odd number, this is not even going to run. It's just going to jump over this whole if block and then return false. Okay. So when we call it's even on an odd number, it returns false. When we call it's even on an even number, it returns true. Once this first return statement is reached, the program exits. It doesn't even get to this one. Once the return statement is reached, it returns it and it's done. It doesn't even get to this line. All right, so basically we have a function that's going to do that too. It's going to return true or false if that number is even or odd. Now let's go ahead and write our program itself. It says write a program that generates 100 random numbers, okay, and keeps a count of how many of those random numbers are even and how many of them are odd. Now let's go ahead and define a main function. Now the main function is a function that runs or should run, I guess, when your program starts. In most programming languages, the main function or the main method is the function that starts or is called when the program starts. It's actually what you should do. Okay, in most programming languages, that's how it's implemented. That's the structure in it. So we should go ahead and create a main function and then write our program there. We should call all other functions in there. Okay, the main function is going to call all other functions in there. So let's define the main function, and then let's write our program. So it's going to, first of all, it's going to generate 100 random numbers, right? So let's just do that. Let's go ahead and generate 100 random numbers. So we can go ahead. We know this is going to generate one random number. Generate random number. I said generated, right? I meant generate. So change it to generate. Oops, and I spelled this entirely wrong. Generate. All right, so generate random number. All right. I think I'm a bit hyper today. I'm always hyper, I guess. Or maybe that's anyway, never mind. Just trying to be funny. Or I guess I don't know. Okay, so the main function is going to basically have our program, and we know this is generating one random number. We're supposed to generate 100 random numbers, so we can call this 100 times using a loop, right? So let's basically create a loop that's going to iterate 100 times. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and use a for loop, okay, and say I'm going to call the target variable current iteration, I guess. For current iteration, I'm just going to say current for current. Let me go ahead and be specific. For current iteration, okay, in range, I'm going to specify a range. I'm going to specify a range from 1, okay, to 101. Now, why did I do 101? This is going to basically specify a range from 1 to 100. Okay, this ending, unlike the run int, the run int includes the 10. It's going to go ahead and generate numbers from 1 to 10. 10 is included, but unlike this is a loop. Unlike the run int, run int works different. Okay, this is a loop. So this basically is going to go ahead and create a range. Or it's going to basically iterate 100 times. It's going to start from 1 to 100, not 101. The ending limit you type here is not included. So 101 that we've typed here is not included. It's one less than the ending limit. So if I type in a range from 1 to 100, it is going to give me a range from 1 to 99. Okay, if I type in 1 and 100 here, it's going to go ahead and give me a range from 1 to 99. So I need to make sure that I always add 1 to it so that I get a range from 1 to 100. Okay, this ending limit again is not included. It's always one less than the ending limit. So now this is going to iterate 100 times from 1 to 100. And then this current, so what's going to happen is the first time this iterates, 1 is going to be assigned to current iteration. And then this loop is going to, whatever code is here is going to run. And this current iteration keeps track of the iteration. So the next time it runs, 2 is going to be assigned to current iteration. And then the block inside the for loop is going to run. And then the next time, 3 is going to be assigned to current iteration, and so on and so forth. All right, so now we know this loop is going to iterate 100 times. So each time, first of all, we want it to generate a random number, right? We can use the function here. So go ahead and generate a random number. That's what we want it to do. I'm calling the function. And we know that once we call this function, it returns a random number. So let's go ahead and save that random number in a variable. Let's call that variable, let's say random number. Now, random number, it doesn't matter that this random number is the same as this random number. It doesn't matter, okay? Although they have the same name, because they're in two different functions, they are considered different. The scope of this random number variable is within the generate random function, and the scope of this random number variable is within the main function. They are considered two different variables because they are in two different functions. They don't see each other, okay? So they are like twins, but they are not the same. Okay. So we know once we call the generate random number function, it's going to go ahead and return a random number. We're storing it here. Now we want to check to see if that random number is even or odd, right? And we have a function here that's checking to see if a number is even. If the number is even, it's going to return true. If the number is odd, it's going to return false, right? So we can go ahead. Now we know that if it's even function accepts a number and basically checks on that number. So let's go ahead, after we've generated a random number, let's go ahead and call this even function that we defined. We defined it to accepting a number. So let's pass in a random number because we want to check to see if that random number is even or odd, right? And if it's even, it's going to return true, right? So we can have an if statement here. Okay, we can have an if statement like this. We can say if, or you can also have parentheses around it. But if we write it this way, it's fine. We can say if is even random number, right? Now think about this. So you don't have to say if is even, okay, is equal to true. You don't have to do that. You don't have to do that because we know is even is going to go ahead and return true or false. You can do this, or suddenly it's going to work. If it's even is equal to true, you can do that. But the if statements, the way it works, let me go ahead and put parentheses around this. This is enough. You don't have to go ahead and say if is even is equal to true, although it will work. But you don't have to do that. You can just say if is even random number. Okay. If whatever is in the parentheses evaluates to true, then it's true. So whatever is in the if block is going to run. Okay. So if, for example, assuming this is an even number, this whole function call is going to go ahead and return true. So if true, right? This if block is going to run as long as whatever is in this parenthesis, the condition is true. So if it returns true, then it's going to pass. It's going to say, okay, that's true. So let me go ahead and do what's in the if block. Now, if it returns false, we know that its even function returns true or false. If it returns false, then whatever is in this if block is not going to run. Whatever we're going to type in the if block is not going to run. So you don't have to go ahead and specifically do that, although you can do this because it's true. Because guess what, this is returning either true or false. So if it returns true, or in this case if it returns false, we are comparing to see if false is equal to false. And if that's and if that whole thing is true, then do something. Or you can also do true. If it returns true, we are comparing to see if true is equal to true. If true is equal to true, then that means this whole condition is true. But you don't have to. You can just do this. You can just say that this. If it's even random number and it's going to return true or false. If it returns true, then whatever is in the if block is going to run. If it returns false, whatever is in the if block is not going to run. All right. So if it's even random number, what we want to do is keep track of how many times or how many random numbers we have. So outside the loop, we don't want to declare this in the loop. I want to declare a variable that's going to keep track of even numbers, and basically even numbers and odd numbers, right? All right, so let's go ahead and create a variable. I'm going to call it number of even numbers. Let's set it to 0 because initially when the program starts, we don't when the program starts, number of even numbers is 0, number of odd numbers is 0. Okay, before we start counting. So let's do the same thing for number of odd numbers. I'm going to go ahead and copy this line and then paste it here. So number of odd numbers. Okay. And then if the number is even, okay, so if it's even random number, then let's go ahead and add 1, okay, to number of even numbers. Okay, sorry. Yeah, so if it's an even number, let's go ahead and add 1 to number of even numbers. That means we found an even number. So let's add 1 to number of even numbers. So in this case, you can go ahead and say that if it's even, the number of even numbers is equal to what is already stored in number of even numbers plus 1. Now what's going to, assuming that we have 0 stored here, okay, so now we found an even number. Okay, so this is going to be equal to 0. If 0 is already stored in number of even numbers, this is going to be equal to 0 plus 1. Now 0 plus 1 gives us 1, and then that whole result 1 is going to be stored in number of even numbers. Now let's assume number of even numbers is, let's say we found 30 numbers so far. So now number of even numbers hold the number 30, right? If we find another number, right, another even number, it's going to be 30 plus 1, and 30 plus 1 gives us 31. And we are going to store the whole of 31 back in number of even numbers. So basically, we are adding 1 to it. We are accumulating how many even numbers we get and how many odd numbers we get, right? Now this can also be written in a shortcut version as number of even numbers plus equals 1, which means what I'm adding to number of even numbers is 1. Okay, I am adding 1 to number of even numbers. Okay, so both ways, whichever one makes you understand it well is good. Okay, what I'm adding to number of even numbers is equal to 1. All right, or what I'm at, or basically I'm adding 1 to number of even numbers here. So that, whichever one helps you. All right, and we can have our else statement, because guess what? If it's not even, then it's odd, right? So, and we know it's even returns true or false. So if this doesn't return true, for this statement to run, everything here in this condition has to be true, right? And we know it's even is going to return true or false. So if it's even returns true, now remember I said everything here has to be true for this statement to run. So if it returns true, then everything here is going to be true. So this statement is going to run. If it returns false, that means this statement is not going to run. That means this whole block is not, it's false, so it's not going to run. So else, if it returns false, then it's going to branch to this else part. Okay, so else, then let's go ahead and add 1 to number of odd numbers. It's the same thing. We are keeping track of the number of odd numbers. So we can basically have number of odd numbers, okay, is equal to what's already stored in number of odd numbers, okay, plus 1. So in this case, I wrote it in the long form. This is a short form. I kept both so you can see both and how they are both working. Okay, so it's going to be equal to what's already stored in number of odd numbers plus 1. So if number of odd numbers holds 0, we are adding 1 to it. 0 plus 1 is going to be 1. We're storing it here. Number of odd numbers holds 1. We are adding 1 to it. It becomes 2. 2 is going to be stored here. We're keeping track of the number of odd numbers.